Jax's revenge domain. When you've been holding up the whole system for 8 years and then your job goes to the boss's daughter who's been there 4 months, it hurts. Ryan Peterson here, 49 years old, and this isn't just another work story. This is about what happens when loyalty meets nepotism and why you should always read the fine print. The emergency alert hit my phone at 2:14 a.m., temperature breach in the Memphis corridor. A shipment of pediatric vaccines bound for rural Arkansas was showing thermal deviation. 2 degrees over threshold. That's all it takes to destroy $250,000 worth of life-saving medicine. I was out of bed before the second beep, didn't need to check the manual or call anyone. I knew exactly which relay point was failing because I'd flagged it in the Q2 risk assessment that Scott Williams never bothered reading. I patched into the carrier's telemetry system, rerouted through our backup in Little Rock, triggered a cold recalibration and logged everything to the FDA registry before their compliance monitor even pinged. The whole fix took me 12 minutes. Scott called 20 minutes later, out of breath. "You saved that shipment again, Ryan. Don't know what we'd do without you?" That was 6 months ago, before Scott's daughter Amanda got her shiny new VP title. For 8 years, I ran Vital Logics Corp's pharmaceutical cold chain without dropping a single vial. That includes vaccine distribution, temperature-controlled transport, emergency protocols, warehouse coordination, and every compliance document from the FDA, CDC, state health departments, and about 15 other acronyms that nobody else in the company fully understood. I kept backup systems for the backup systems. When that ice storm hit Oklahoma and grounded half our fleet, I had alternate routes mapped and running within 3 hours. When the FDA surprised us with an unscheduled audit in Phoenix, my documentation was so clean they finished early and commended our protocols. Scott used to call me his ace in the hole. But when bonus time rolled around, his golf buddies got theirs first. I got gift cards to places I didn't shop. "We're saving your real reward for later," he'd say with that politician smile. "Just stick around for the 8-year mark and you'll see." He meant the loyalty vest. It wasn't about sentiment. It was about math. The clause was buried in a supplemental agreement from the Texas freeze crisis 3 years back, when a power grid failure threatened to destroy $80 million worth of vaccine inventory across the state. I redesigned our entire emergency response system in 72 hours, coordinating with 14 distribution centers and 6 backup cold storage facilities. We didn't lose a single dose. In exchange for basically saving the company, I negotiated a loyalty compensation package. $2.9 million tied to my continued oversight and performance through an 8-year milestone. The contract was ironclad because our legal team wrote it themselves, so I kept going. Didn't complain when new hires got promoted over me. Didn't say anything when Scott started calling my methods old school in meetings. But what finally broke everything was a single sentence buried in the September company newsletter. "We're excited to welcome Amanda Williams as our new VP of Operations." Amanda Williams. Same last name as Scott. I clicked her profile. Fresh MBA from Northwestern Kellogg. 4 months of internship experience. 0 field deployments, 0 crisis management, 0 carrier negotiations. Her bio mentioned innovative supply chain strategies and digital transformation initiatives, the kind of corporate speak you hear from consultants who've never carried a cooler through customs. At 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, nobody informed me about this promotion. No reorganization meeting, no transition planning, just a cheerful newsletter announcement. And suddenly I, the guy who wrote the standard operating procedures for vaccine distribution used by 3 state governments, was apparently reporting to someone whose biggest achievement was a PowerPoint deck titled Cold Chain 2.0, a strategic vision. I printed the newsletter. Then I opened my secure file drawer and pulled out my contract, Clause 17C, a little gem I'd written myself and tucked away like insurance. It said this: "In the event of reassignment or demotion within 60 days of loyalty vesting, the employee may elect voluntary termination and trigger full acceleration of deferred compensation regardless of cause." Here's what that meant in plain English. If they tried to sideline me right before payday, I could walk away and they'd still owe me every penny, plus penalties if they delayed payment. I had evidence. The clause had been countersigned, filed, and forgotten by their own legal department. Nobody had looked at it in years. I didn't yell or threaten. I printed the clause and waited. When you've spent 8 years running systems where 1 degree of temperature deviation can ruin everything, you learn patience. You let the pressure build. You watch who panics first. Here's what I learned about workplace backstabbing. It never comes with warning bells and flashing lights. It comes quietly, buried between updates about the employee wellness program and the annual charity drive. That's where I found it, nestled like a landmine. Amanda Williams has been promoted to VP of Operations, effective immediately. I read it 5 times. Not because I didn't understand, but because my brain refused to process it. Amanda, Scott's daughter. The same Amanda who, during her internship, asked me to explain the difference between refrigerated and frozen storage requirements. Who thought dry ice was probably fine for everything cold. Who once suggested we could save money by using regular delivery trucks with portable coolers. And now she was my boss. I sat still for a minute, just breathing. Then I pulled up her internal profile. Same headshot from orientation day. The recent projects section listed presentations I had ghostwritten for her. The approval section showed exactly 0 signatures on any operational decisions. I wasn't angry yet. That would come later. What I felt was that moment when you know everything's about to break. I sent a polite message to HR through the internal portal, just checking on my loyalty vesting timeline. Was everything still on track for the October 15th release date? The response came 2 days later. We're reviewing updated role classifications following recent organizational changes. We'll circle back shortly. Circle back. I've spent years decoding FDA compliance reports in pharmaceutical regulatory language. I know corporate doublespeak when I see it. Circle back means delay. It means lawyers are reading your contract. So I read it myself. I still remember drafting Clause 17C. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Friday 3 years ago. We were in the middle of the Texas crisis. Vaccine shipments were backing up across 4 states because our competitors' systems had failed. I was running the operation. From a folding table in a Dallas warehouse, coordinating emergency deliveries to rural hospitals. That night, after we'd saved every single dose and Scott was taking credit on the investor call, I added one final clause to my retention agreement. The lawyers were so relieved about avoiding the crisis that they would have signed anything I put in front of them. The clause went through. Now here we were. Amanda got promoted. I got demoted to senior advisor, legacy operations. A title that sounded important but came with 0 authority, 0 budget, and 0 respect. I knew what would happen next. They wouldn't fire me outright. That would trigger severance questions and potential lawsuits. Instead, they'd restructure around me. Strip my responsibilities. Call it strategic repositioning while moving all my systems under Amanda's oversight. But I wasn't planning to be restructured. I printed Clause 17C, highlighted the key sections, and attached copies of Amanda's promotion announcement with timestamps. Then I waited, not with hope, but with precision. Scott wore his usual confidence like a badly fitted suit when he called the all-hands meeting. He stood at the front of the conference room like he was about to deliver a keynote speech, one hand resting on Amanda's chair like she was some kind of business royalty. "This is an exciting time for Vital Logics," he announced. "Amanda will be overseeing all operational systems with a focus on modernization and efficiency improvements." The slide behind him showed our company logo and the words Operational Excellence Initiative 2024 with her new title underneath, Vice President of Operations and Strategic Development. Her biggest strategy so far had been suggesting we replace our crisis response protocols with agile methodologies and real-time optimization. The room was dead quiet. Nobody clapped. My team kept their eyes glued to their laptops. Justin Parker, who'd logged 19 consecutive clean audits across the Southwest region, looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Jennifer Taylor, our warehouse coordination specialist, took a very long sip from her coffee cup. Then Scott clicked to the next slide. "Of course, we want to acknowledge the continued support of our senior advisor," he said, like he was struggling to remember my name. "Ryan's institutional knowledge will be invaluable during this transition period." Institutional knowledge. That's what you call someone you're planning to archive. I had a new title, 0 decision-making power, and no mention in the organizational chart, just a ceremonial role designed to ease me toward the exit without legal complications. Scott didn't look at me when he said it. Amanda did, though. She smiled like she was trying to apologize and celebrate at the same time. I didn't react, just sat with my hands folded, watching the projector like it was a countdown timer. When the meeting ended, people filed out like they were leaving a funeral. Quiet, uncomfortable, No sudden movements. Scott put his arm around Amanda's shoulder and said, "Why don't you take some time to review the operational reports? I'll walk you through the implementation timeline after I talk with him." Him. Not Ryan. Not even my last name. Just a pronoun. I was already standing when he turned around, already holding the envelope. Professional letterhead, properly formatted, hand-delivered. He saw it and immediately dropped the fake warmth. "Hey, Ryan. I was actually planning to stop by your office later this afternoon. Just to chat about how we can make this transition smooth for everyone." I handed him the envelope. He opened it right there in the hallway, in full view of 2 department heads and an intern carrying a box of promotional stress balls. He read the header, "Notice of Resignation and Clause 17C Invocation." His face went pale. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Ryan, you're not actually leaving, are you?" I looked him straight in the eye for the first time during that entire meeting. "I am." His mouth opened. No sound came out, just this hollow intake of air like his business plan had suddenly collapsed. I turned and walked away. No dramatic pause, no final speech, just movement, clean and mechanical. Behind me, silence, the kind that only happens when pressure finally equalizes. Scott liked to think he was a master of gentle transitions, soft reorganizations that weren't technically demotions, new titles that sounded prestigious but came with reduced authority and smaller budgets. He once bragged to a vendor rep, "We don't fire people at Vital Logics, we just evolve their roles until they decide to pursue other opportunities." That approach didn't work out so well. At exactly 4:47 p.m., his inbox received an email he definitely wasn't expecting. Subject line, "Formal Notice, Clause 17C, Invocation and Compensation Acceleration." Sent from my attorney's office, not my personal account. No fluff, just facts. The email was 3 sentences long. "This letter serves as formal notice of voluntary resignation under Clause 17C, triggered by material reassignment within 60 days of loyalty vesting. The reassignment constitutes structural demotion as evidenced by removal from operational oversight and reclassification of authority levels. Full acceleration of deferred compensation is now enforceable per contractual terms." Attached was a 68-page documentation packet. Section 1, 8 years of performance evaluations. All marked exceeds expectations. Signed by Scott himself, sometimes with handwritten notes like, "Essential to our success and outstanding crisis management." Section 2, operational audit results. Clean records from every region, FDA inspection reports, state compliance certifications, 0 incident reports across 23,000 temperature-critical shipments. Average response time for emergency situations, 8.4 minutes. That statistic had been featured in our last 2 annual reports. Section 3, the organizational restructuring memo, dated and distributed through internal systems. The document that reclassified my position from Director of Pharmaceutical Logistics to Senior Advisor, Legacy Operations, explicitly removing operational authority, budget approval, and crisis response coordination, digitally signed by Scott and HR. Section 4, a little bonus I'd been saving. An internal email thread from Amanda's onboarding process. Scott had written to the VP of Human Resources, "Let's keep Amanda's initial classification simple. This is more of a family development opportunity than a traditional role. No need for full operational onboarding unless she demonstrates long-term commitment. Family development opportunity." That was the foundation they built a VP title on. The final page contained a summary from my attorney. Involuntary reassignment disguised as promotion. Client's role was not restructured for operational needs, but was deliberately diminished to accommodate a family member with insufficient qualifications. This constitutes breach of the implied good faith principle embedded in the loyalty compensation agreement. That phrase, involuntary reassignment disguised as promotion, carried legal weight. It meant what happened wasn't an accident or a business decision. It was calculated, intentional, and now it was documented. Scott didn't respond that night, but I can imagine how it felt. Sitting in his home office, realizing that his smooth transition plan for me was about to become a very expensive legal obligation for him. The clause wasn't symbolic. It was a tripwire, mechanical and precise, buried under 8 years of loyal service. and Scott had just stepped on it with both feet. Scott's first move was denial. Predictable. He called legal before 8 a.m. the next morning and claimed the VP announcement was preliminary and subject to further organizational review. He said he hadn't intended to trigger any structural changes to my role, that everything was still under discussion. He was lying, of course. Worse, he thought lying would fix it. But this wasn't some informal promotion or hallway conversation. It was documented, systemized, and logged in the one place executives hate to have problems: audit trails. Legal started their investigation that morning. First stop, Vital Logics' organizational database. Amanda Williams was listed as Vice President of Operations in all regional systems, Southwest, Central, and Gulf Coast divisions. Her authority permissions had been manually activated by Scott himself on a Thursday evening at 6:23 p.m. IP logged, digital signature preserved, timestamp recorded. Second stop, decision approval records. Amanda had already signed off on a temperature variance override for a shipment to rural Texas. High-risk cargo, 75,000 units of pediatric vaccines with insurance liability exceeding $400,000. Her signature was on the approval form, not mine. Her VP credentials authorized the decision. Strike two, third stop, HR system logs. My job title was changed from Director of Pharmaceutical Logistics to Senior Advisor, Legacy Operations at exactly 5:18 a.m. on the same day Amanda's promotion was announced. Automatically processed with Scott's electronic signature. I wasn't even awake yet, and I'd already been stripped of operational authority. Looks like we've crossed the threshold, the corporate counsel told Scott during an emergency conference call. Clause 17C is fully enforceable. Someone on the legal team suggested I might withdraw the resignation voluntarily if approached the right way. Maybe Scott could reach out personally, have a conversation, offer some ceremonial compromise. That's when Scott tried calling. 3 times from his office line, twice from his cell phone. I let every call go to voicemail. Then came the email disguised as casual concern. Hi Ryan, hope you're getting some rest. Obviously there have been some communication gaps with these organizational changes. These transitions are always messy at first. Would really appreciate the chance to talk. Let's see if we can work something out. Work something out. You can't negotiate a contract clause that's already been triggered. You can't walk back a resignation that's been filed with legal documentation. The moment Amanda made her first VP-level approval, Scott made the whole situation irreversible. It wasn't personal anymore. It was procedural, and procedures don't care about relationships or second chances, unless I withdrew the claim voluntarily, which I didn't. Not that day, not the next week, not ever. But Scott's real mistake wasn't just thinking I'd go quietly. It was not reading the penalty clause buried at the end of Clause 17C, a subsection I'd added during late-night negotiations when legal tried to delay my vesting by a quarter due to budget considerations. The penalty clause was simple. If accelerated compensation is not released within 72 hours of resignation notice receipt, funds shall incur penalty. Interest of $400 per hour until full remittance is confirmed. They'd signed it. I had just saved the company from a multi-million-dollar loss during the vaccine shortage crisis, and Scott was so busy taking credit on earnings calls that he probably never read the details. But now the meter was running. My resignation hit his inbox Tuesday at 4:47 p.m. That meant Friday at 4:47 p.m. was the deadline, and legal was already sweating. First they claimed confusion about the vesting schedule, then HR reported a technical delay in payroll system processing. But every excuse ran into the same problem: time-stamped documentation, signed authorizations, and Amanda's VP approval sitting in the system logs with Scott's digital signature attached. By Friday afternoon, we were 6 hours past the grace period. The penalty meter had racked up $8,400 and counting. That's when Amanda made her move. She sent me an email at 3:22 p.m. Friday from her official VP account. Subject line, "Can we talk?" The message read, "Hi Ryan, I know this whole transition has been challenging and maybe things moved faster than they should have. I really want to make this right before it gets more complicated. Could we set up a time to chat? I'd love to find a way to work together moving forward." No acknowledgement of what she'd stepped into. No understanding of the legal machinery now grinding toward its conclusion. Just the cheerful optimism of someone who thought this was still about hurt feelings. I didn't reply to Amanda. I forwarded her email to my attorney. He didn't respond to her either, but he did CC her message to Vital Logics' legal team with a single line: "Please advise your client that direct contact will be considered interference with pending contract enforcement." 2 hours later, the company's finance department requested wire transfer instructions. By then, the penalty clock had reached $12,600. No negotiations, no payment plans, just enforcement. They wired the full amount. $2.9 million in principal plus $12,600 in penalty interest. The transfer cleared before close of business. With that, Clause 17C did exactly what it was designed to do. No threats, no arguments, just cold mechanical precision, like a temperature control system maintaining exactly the right conditions. The aftermath was swift and quiet. No press releases, no company announcements, just careful internal memos and strategic departures. 3 weeks later, Vital Logic sent out a brief update in their monthly investor newsletter. Following a successful 8-year tenure, Scott Williams has elected to step back from daily operations to focus on family priorities and strategic consulting opportunities. Amanda's exit was even more understated. Amanda Williams is taking extended leave to pursue advanced leadership development and continuing education programs. The new VP of Operations was Justin Parker, one of my guys. I'd trained him personally on emergency protocols, walked him through compliance procedures, and guided him through his first crisis management situations. Steady, methodical, never cutting corners. People used to think he was too cautious. That's exactly why I recommended him. Justin's name was in the press release. Mine wasn't mentioned anywhere. Didn't need to be. You know what's funny? The week after I left, they had 2 temperature breaches. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to trigger FDA notifications and require incident reports. Justin handled them fine, but it took him 45 minutes each time instead of my usual 8-minute response. He's learning, and he'll get there. But it made me realize something. All those years, I thought Scott didn't appreciate what I did. Truth is, he had no idea what I did. He saw the results, clean audits, 0 incidents, smooth operations. But he never understood the system that made it possible. To him, it just worked. Like turning on a light switch. When you don't understand how something works, you think anyone can do it. Now I consult for 3 pharmaceutical companies, all scaling up their cold chain operations for national expansion. Clean designs, redundant systems, full regulatory compliance from day one. My rate is $850 per hour, and I'm booked 6 months out. Every time I sit down with new clients, the first question is always the same. Can you build it like Vital Logics had? That's when I smile. Not with pride or nostalgia, but because they think it was Vital Logics' system. It wasn't. It was mine. Every protocol, every backup procedure, every crisis response plan. And I tell them the same thing every time, only if you read the fine print. They laugh. I don't. Because the system held. Not because of Scott's leadership or Amanda's innovation strategies, but because I built it to last, layer by layer, clause by clause, like pharmaceutical-grade storage. Reliable, precise, and unshakable once it's properly installed. The best part? I sleep better now. For 8 years, I carried the weight of knowing that one mistake, one oversight, one system failure could cost lives. Not just money, actual lives. Kids waiting for vaccines, cancer patients needing specialized medicines, rural hospitals depending on our deliveries. That stress never left me. Even at home, my phone was always on, always ready for the next emergency call. My wife used to joke that I talked to temperature sensors more than I talked to her. She wasn't entirely wrong. Now that weight belongs to Justin, and he's handling it well because I trained him right. But it's not my responsibility anymore. Last month, one of my new clients, a biotech startup in Austin, asked me about building in protection against nepotism and favoritism in their operational structure. Apparently, word gets around about these things. I told them it's simple. You build systems that reward competence and punish incompetence. You document everything. You make the rules clear and apply them equally. And most importantly, you always read the fine print before you sign anything. Because here's what I learned in 8 years of keeping medicines cold and systems running. Precision matters. Whether it's maintaining temperature within 2 degrees or enforcing contract terms to the hour, precision is what separates professionals from amateurs. And when people try to cut corners or take shortcuts with something that important, they discover that precision has a price, usually higher than they expected to pay.